Father God, love that would not let us go. Thank you so much. We can thank you from now to the end of our days, and thank you for eternity. We praise you that we will.
Yes.
And we just thank you for your gifts, the beautiful day, the sunshine, the food that you give us, that you keep our lives together. We thank you for your word, your love letters to us. We've come here now to study that word. We ask that your Spirit would be here, open our hearts and our minds to learn what you would have us know of you. And we thank you and we praise you in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, today is exciting because we're going to study Daniel 7. And what do we know about 7?
Would you mind?
Nothing.
We know nothing.
Next joke, 60 seconds.
Kind of an extension of Daniel 2, isn't it? Daniel
Yes,
7?
yes, if you remember
Adds details.
our chiastic structure of Daniel. But what else do we know about Daniel? What's with the number 7?
God's perfect number.
It's God's number, right? So we've been studying, remember in chapter 4 and 5, we studied a lot about the sixes, right? The mark of the beast. But today we're going to do 7, and so 7 is God's number, so we're going to be learning about God and his patterns and the way he works. So yes, in our chiastic structure, chapter 7 is parallel to chapter 2. And so we remember the dream that Nebuchadnezzar got was of an image. But is God going to give an image dream to a Hebrew?
Right.
Of course not. That's idolatry. So the imagery is going to be different, and there's going to be more details about God and kind of the end of the prophecy. So I just want to quickly remind you, when Nebuchadnezzar had his dream, help me out here, this is his head. This was
Babylon,
and then
Medo Persia, Greece,
Rome. Ten kingdoms that were to follow.
and Ra,
which became.
a great mountain.
Okay, so we remember this had 7 parts, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Wow.
Okay, so the image that the dream that Daniel gets is also going to have 7 parts. So 7, 7. So let's look at Daniel 7. Now, there's an interesting parallel between Daniel 7 and another important 7 in the Bible. And as I read verse 1 and 2 with a special emphasis on certain words, I want you to tell me what other 7 event was alluded to here. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and vision of his head while on the bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, four winds of heaven stirring up the great sea. Does this remind you of something?
Yeah, something in Revelation, I think.
Yeah, probably. Something else? I saw.
Moses.
He saw night, darkness, winds, water.
Creation.
Are you talking about the angel's message?
No.
Because the darkness, okay.
Although it's certainly there
City would be the
too.
light, and
Yeah.
the night would be the darkness revealed.
But we're actually looking at creation. And we're going to go to Genesis 1. And we're going to look at some things in Genesis 1 that we're going to see in Daniel 7. And as we go through this, I want you to think why this is important. So Genesis 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void and darkness. And the Spirit of God was hovering. You know, in the Hebrew, winds can also be translated as spirit.
Yeah.
The
And breath.
Spirit of God.
Mhm.
And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So there's all these similar words. And of course, if we go through, and verse 4, well, let's read verse 3. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, and it was good. God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day. Okay, so verse 4, you saw that God said it was good. So, you know, I could never remember what was created what until Pastor Raymond said it this way. God created by first making the major entities, right?
Right.
So the major entities,
Firmament is
it's
heaven.
the heavens, the atmosphere, yeah. And then after God created the major entities, then he put things in them. So first day, second day, third day, and then on the fourth day, he put things in. So the sun, the moon, and the stars. So this is the fourth day. Then the fifth day, he put things in the land and the sea. So the birds, and fish. And then the sixth day, us. And then the seventh day, he.
Rested.
That's it.
So do you remember in the image, you know, the seventh was, the mountain was the kingdom of God. And so, again, you know, on the seventh day, there's the kingdom of God and there's rest. So,
Sorry, does the light on the creation day, does that correspond with I saw?
That was my question too.
well, if we read through the story in Genesis 1, God says 7 times he saw that it was good, right? Verse 4 was the first one. God saw the light and it was good. Verse 10, God saw that it was good. Verse 12, God saw that it was good. Verse 18, God saw that it was good. Verse 21, God saw that it was good. Verse 25, God saw that it was good. Verse 31, God saw it was very good. How many are God saws there?
Sleep.
7.
Okay, so 7 times God said, you know, it was good. All right, so So that's kind of a pattern in Genesis. And so why do you think this is important to the study of Daniel?
Okay. Give us a minute. Oh,
You have the same pattern.
Yes, I like that. It's the patterns, and we know God works in patterns, right? This happens, and then this happens. You know, that's what the Bible is about. You do this, you do that, and this happens.
so the beginning and the end? Is that where you're going?
Revelation is
I don't know. I know that Timothy Raymond spent a long time telling us why Daniel 7 was like Genesis 1. And I distinctly remember saying to him, after he spent all this time counting the God talk, why is this important? and he said the answer so fast I forgot it. Well, so I think the reality is it's seeing the patterns, right? Because when we get to Revelation, we know that all repeats. You know, the seven,
Right.
the seven churches, the seven seals, the seven plagues.
Right.
And so seeing God's pattern
Yes.
helps you see the pattern in Revelation. Uh,
What about how it says that there was the beast that came up out of the sea, and sea means something. The sea is not people, it's a nation. And then the beast that came from, was it land? And they came from someplace else.
mhm.
So you can go through that, not everything that's represented is in the birds and what they worship. You can go through that.
Mm.
Yes.
Mhm.
False worship, true worship. It
Mhm.
means the same thing, because
Sure.
it is all about worship,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Now, what's the other thing you see in Genesis 2 that we're going to see in Daniel 7?
The image.
Um,
Well, God made us. He uses that word image here,
in the image. Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's an
Let
interesting.
us make man in our image,
Mhm.
right? And he said that he could only relate to those that were not of God in that idol kind of like form where they see them as God, as God's gift. When we look at ourselves made in God's image, it's the opposite. Remember he said, wherever there's an evil, there's a good.
Sure, there's always a counterfeit.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's good.
So that
Yeah.
relates to that too, because
Sure.
we're talking about the image, and
Uh-huh,
there's God's image, and then there's what man,
right, right.
Lost
No,
word.
that's good. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, God, thank you so much. I would have forgotten them. Thank you, Kevin.
I like those sunglasses.
They're prescriptive.
Yeah, they might be. It's one of these that I got at the Salvation Army when the Lord said I need glasses, and
I have four
They were my
optometrists in my family. Okay, so the other thing I want you to notice in Genesis 2 is there was no form, there was void, and there was darkness. Void, darkness, and void. Who does that remind you of?
Is that just adversary?
Yes, thank you. You know, this is Satan and God in conflict in
Yes,
verse
exactly.
2. There's darkness, and God wants to bring light, and there's conflict there. So the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So do you think there's going to be conflict in Daniel 7? Yes, there's
From the
going to be
beginning to the end.
huge conflict, right? So there's the Antichrist fighting against the true Christ. And so, I think knowing that Genesis starts with a conflict between good and evil, and Daniel continues that theme, and Revelation continues that theme. And so throughout the whole Bible, you're going to see this conflict. Okay? So I think what's important about seeing the similarities in Genesis and Daniel is seeing the patterns, seeing how God works, knowing God's character,
Yeah.
and and recognizing that there's a conflict.
Yeah, very controversial.
Mhm.
There's like, I also heard a man do a sermon on Genesis and Revelation. He said Revelation is Genesis in reverse. Because you go through and you see the animals dying, the trees dying, the things dying, and it was very like, whoa, you can see that,
That's
right?
what, yeah, that's what I'm coming to today, and Daniel is telling us it is coming, so it's kind of like in the middle, so the beginning, the middle, and the end.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Of course, it all works together, but it's just beautiful to see it. Oh, I know. Sounds so simple.
That's once your eyes open.
So, I want you to look up a few verses for me. Can you do Ezekiel 37:9? And we're looking at stirring up the great sea. And Revelation 7:1, 2,
Revelation 1,
7:1. And Mark 13:27. And Matthew 24:31. And honestly, I don't know if we're talking about winds of heaven or
24:31?
stirring up the great sea. Matthew 24:31. I think this is the four winds of heaven. We're talking about the four winds of heaven.
Yes.
Because in creation it
Yeah.
says the four winds. So these are verses about four winds. Ezekiel 37:9.
Also he said to me, prophesy to the breath, prophesy, son of man, and say to the breath, thus says the Lord God, come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe on these slain, that they may live.
Okay, Revelation 7:1. After these things, I saw four angels standing at the four corners of the earth, holding the four winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, on the sea, or on any tree.
Mark 13:27. And then he will send his angels and gather together his elect from the four winds, from the farthest part of earth to the farthest part of heaven.
And Matthew 24:31. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other.
All right, now we can go back to Daniel 7. Okay, so in verse 3, we just read about the four winds. Now, as Danielle brought up earlier, we're going to see four great beasts. Okay, so four great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. Okay, this is going to test my drawing skills.
That's all right, it's so far.
Okay. There's the lion.
That's a very happy, friendly lion.
Okay, we don't want it to be happy. Just show its teeth. And then it had eagle's wings, right? Okay, so who is this and how do you know? The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I watched till its wings were plucked off. It was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. So tell me what that verse means. How do you know it's Babylon, Brian?
Well, they use it as symbols themselves, too.
The Babylonian Empire used.
The lion was the symbol of the Babylonian Empire, but also,
Strength.
its wings were plucked off. It had wings, and then they were plucked off. You could almost put that with Nebuchadnezzar's dream, where he was cut down. When he, you go back to Daniel, I think it's 4,
Yeah.
where he was leveled. God leveled him, And then he was given a man's heart. So his heart was made right towards God.
Okay,
He
so
was pulled up on
history,
two
yeah.
feet to stand like a man
All right,
after he
yeah.
went around like
Yeah.
a beast.
And then, all the prophets told this. Let's see, whose turn is it? Jeff? Jeremiah 4:7. Do you want to read a verse?
No, thank you.
Okay. Brian? Habakkuk 1:6-8. It's Elena. Elaine, do you want to read a verse? Lamentations 4:19.
Hey, what about me?
I ran out. It'll be your turn next. Okay, who has Jeremiah 4:7?
All right. The lion has come up from his thicket, and the destroyer of the Gentiles is on his way. He has gone forth from his place to make thy land desolate, and thy cities shall be laid waste without an inhabitant.
Who was Jeremiah talking to? Who was going to be laid waste?
Israel,
Right.
Yeah.
And who was going to do it?
Babylon.
The lion, yeah. Brian?
Habakkuk 1:6-8. For indeed I am raising up the Chaldeans, a bitter and hasty nation, which marches through the breadth of the earth to possess dwelling places that are not theirs. They are terrible and dreadful. Their judgment and their dignity proceed from themselves. Their horses also are swifter than leopards, and more fierce than evening wolves.
Okay, so there it tells you the Chaldeans, which are the Babylonians. So they're swift, hence they have wings.
Oh, I didn't finish it.
Oh,
Verse
sorry.
8. Their chargers charge ahead, their cavalry comes from afar. They fly as the eagle that hastens to eat.
Wow.
That makes a big difference, those
So
last
they're
couple of...
strong and they're swift, right?
Yeah, strength and speed.
All right. Lamentations?
Lamentations 5:19.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's 4.
4.
Yeah.
Lamentations 4. Okay. Our pursuers were swifter than the eagles of the heavens. They pursued us on the mountains and laid in wait for us in the wilderness.
Okay. So did Judah have plenty of warning that Babylon was coming? Yeah, I mean,
Many years.
Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Habakkuk, Lamentations, all those prophets told what was coming. So it was no surprise.
Or
Well, it kind of was.
right in Daniel 7, I think, is it verse 17? It doesn't say which kingdoms they are, but it does let us know that these beasts, which are four kingdoms. So
Right.
then that's kind of a stepping stone
Sure,
to looking at which kingdoms they are.
sure. Yeah, no, that's great.
In
Yeah.
Daniel 2:38, it says, well, it starts off with the king, he calls him the head of gold. He calls Nebuchadnezzar the head of gold there. So we've got Babylon as a starting point.
Right, yeah. Okay, so its wings were plucked off, and, John had said that Nebuchadnezzar and his whole kingdom, when they first started, they were strong, and they were just going around so fast, conquering all these other kingdoms. But then, they lost some of that power, and Nebuchadnezzar himself certainly lost his power. And made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Does somebody want to say a little bit more about that?
It's just interesting that that when someone is prominent in battle and in winning wars, that often they're called lion-hearted. It's just an interesting correlation.
And they're also not so good at keeping the peace.
But I guess if he goes from having wings to feet,
Yeah.
that's kind
now, he's standing on 2 feet, he's just a man now.
2 feet and a heart, right?
Yes.
Like us.
Yeah.
Heart may also symbolize compassion, learning
Or
compassion.
pride,
Mm.
or pride.
Right, from a human
I mean,
perspective.
if you look at, who described, was it Jeremiah, the heart of man?
Deceitful above all things.
Yeah,
Jeremiah.
deceitful above all things, and yep, right. So-
Oh, yeah, that fits better,
So-
actually, yeah.
13.
And there's no end to the evil in it, I mean, there's no end to its evil intentions, I mean, it's that really,
Sure.
would be a man's heart given to it.
Yeah, no, yeah.
But I also think it symbolizes, now he has a weakness. He's weak now. He's not, doesn't have that
Right, there's no
strength in
vitality.
battle, and he can't be a conqueror anymore because now he's weak like a man. He doesn't have that lion heart anymore.
Sure, yeah, no, that's good, yeah, yeah.
Isn't that what they refer to when they say, he clipped his wings?
Mhm.
Jeremiah 17.
Okay, so notice in verse 2, that's, I saw number 1. Daniel saw, okay, so we saw the lion. Okay, so verse 5, and suddenly another beast, a second like a bear. It was raised up on one side, had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and they said thus to it, arise, devour much flesh.
Sure.
That looks just like the bear I saw the other day.
It's uncanny, it's uncanny.
Looks like a 3-legged dog. Okay, so we know who this was, right? And again, history of the Bible makes it pretty clear that after
Medo-Persia.
Nebuchadnezzar came and lived in the Persians.
With Daniel 5, right?
Okay, and can somebody address that it was raised up on one side?
One of the nations was more powerful than the other.
Mm-hmm. And the 3 ribs in its mouth?
Talk about 3 kingdoms.
Yeah, can you tell me those kingdoms?
No.
John?
What are they?
The 3 kingdoms, the 3 ribs in its mouth? Oh, I better draw those ribs.
Yes.
Oh, no.
So we know Babylon was one, right? And they said thus to it, arise, devour much flesh.
What chapter is this?
Chapter 7.
Oh,
We're on verse 5. After this I looked, and there was another like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. How's you drawing a beast, Brian? You do a sanctuary pretty well.
Yeah, that's a lot of straight lines though. I can give it a shot.
Give it a
Because
stab.
I'm failing miserably.
Oh, excuse me.
Okay, so a leopard.
Thank you.
What does a leopard symbolize?
Speed.
Speed. Speed. Which had on its back 4 wings.
Really?
The beast had 4 heads.
Turbocharged leopard.
Yeah. Yeah. So who is this?
Greece, specifically under Alexander the Great.
Yeah. He was marching through the land, wasn't he?
He took up his orders, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
okay, come on, Brian.
No, I'm just copying.
That's all right.
Problem is I'm gonna run out
That's all
of
I
space.
did too. Okay, so verse 6 was I looked. Okay, so if you count up the times Daniel says I looked and I saw, of course it's going to be 7 times because he saw 7 parts to this kingdom. This dream, I mean, sorry. All right, so verse 6, that's the leopard. And that's Greece. Okay, verse 7, after this, I saw, so we see another I saw, in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. Iron matches the legs, right? Iron. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns.
What are we talking about now? I only have one head in mind.
Oh, that's really good.
Oh, that's, yeah.
Those are big. So what was the next one?
Terrible beast.
Oh,
Doesn't specify what it is. That one's gonna be tough to draw.
Iron teeth. Iron teeth.
Draw iron teeth.
Just
Draw iron teeth with 10
draw a
horns.
Yeti.
Okay, just draw the hands.
What's the Yeti?
Draw a Yeti. Well,
Oh,
Terrible beast.
you want to draw a picture of a cooler?
Yeah, those are
Okay, so the terrible beast was Rome, right? Exceedingly strong, iron teeth, devouring and breaking. Why do you think it was different from all the beasts that were before it?
Because Rome got so big,
Well, definitely lasted longer.
well, you know,
It's lasted to today
rules.
in some respects.
that's
Well,
right.
Well,
Is it-
it has more parts to it than any of the other ones. It's just one beast, but this beast was many in one.
That would fit with the empire. But it was stronger
that's
than the
good.
rest.
Mm.
And it ruled a lot. Then it ruled it.
And you know, you think me to Persia, you know, they were pretty sympathetic to the Jews, right? They let them go back. I mean, these other kingdoms were exceedingly terrible. I mean, they were conquerors, but
Yeah.
they weren't
But they saw their-
crushing things.
Right, but they also saw their benefit that they could use out of who they took in, right?
Yeah, even
And,
Alexander.
and that's where God was
not-
able to work in, I think,
Mm,
in that aspect. Where
right,
they had some pliability where I don't think this one has any.
right.
Oh, that's
Actually-
wonderful.
Actually, it did. Rome took in and it allowed each of the countries that it had dominance over, it allowed them to keep their religions, etc.
Well, and that's why the Jews were still able to worship in the
Right,
temple.
exactly.
But if you disobeyed them,
Right.
there was
That's where the iron teeth came in.
Yeah.
It did allow the other nations that they conquered to have to maintain their own religions, but at the same time, Rome, when they took over a nation, everything they did was to their own purpose and for their own.
Yeah.
Right, it made them easier to rule by letting them have bits and pieces of autonomy. Not real autonomy, but just leaving little bit, that's something that creates a bigger fight. You start struggling on religion and stuff, you get a bigger fight than if you just say, look, we're the government,
Pay
pay
us
some
taxes.
taxes, Caesar's your king, get over it.
Well, Rome, their purpose was self-interest in
Yeah.
everywhere they conquered, and with Jerusalem and Israel, there was not at first there was no military conquering. The Israelites actually invited them in so that they could fight against the remnants of the Greeks.
Mm-hmm.
And so they came in and occupied the land of Israel, and that was it from then on, because they had actually kind of tricked the Israelites into letting them in there.
It's like Satan does into our hearts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like, I can't remember the tribe now, but when Joshua was going through the promised land, there was one tribe that came all dressed in, or one kingdom, they came all dressed in ratty stuff, and like they've been, we're poor, we're this, and they got him to create a covenant with them. So it's kind of, the Romans did the same thing to Israel.
Yes.
Oh gee, it happens again, huh?
And God told them
How about
not to
that?
not to make friends with them.
God told them not to make
Before
friends
that.
with the pagans. They made
Right.
friends with the pagans.
Yeah.
Now they make friends with the pagan Romans. Happens again,
Yeah.
It's there's a pattern there.
Yeah.
They sought the
The
worldly
evangelicals
alliances,
are
yeah.
making friends.
Yes, they are.
So this would be all reasons why they are different from the other beasts. Yeah, good.
And verse 7, notice again, he uses the night visions, the darkness. Again, he's saying, this is darkness, this is conflict. And can somebody address the 10 horns? It had 10 horns.
Those were the 10 tribes, because 2 of the tribes, I don't know, am I wrong yet? I don't want to
No.
go any
Keep on
further.
speaking.
Talks
10
about,
of the tribes, 2 of
talks
the
about
tribes
kingdoms.
were not a part of it, right? And then 4 tribes were yanked out, the Ostrogoths, the Haloats, the Malachites, and the
No, you're almost there. You're so close. Keep going.
and the Gatherites were plucked out. I know that's the wrong name, but
Yeah.
they all rhymed
It was three.
anyways.
It was three.
That's verse 8, right?
Right. There were 10 kingdoms that made up Rome,
Yeah.
which it split into eventually, and then
The 4 generals,
three-
right?
no. The 4 generals is before that.
Oh, my bad. Okay.
You're talking about the Ptolemaic Wars after Alexander the Great.
Okay, well,
Um,
these
no,
3 tribes were
when
yanked out.
when Rome broke up into its 10 kingdoms that composed it, the Roman Empire,
Yeah.
the little horn that came up, and that's coming up in the next verse, that plucked up 3 of the other horns, plucked up the Ostrogoths, the Heruli,
And the Vandals.
and the Vandals.
Oh, there was only 3.
Right. All between 476 and I think 508.
With Clovis.
Hmm?
Clovis.
With Clovis, right. So those are the 3 horns that were subdued by the little horn. And then the little horn grows exceedingly great.
So that's in verse 8. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one,
Thank you, John.
coming up before them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. And there in this horn were eyes of the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. And so, in some versions it says, verse 8 says, I was considering the horns, and behold, and we count that behold as one of our 7, saw and behold. Some verses don't say the behold, but it was another part of the kingdom that he's beholding, so.
Isn't
So
it
7 or what?
Isn't it diverse also from the other kingdoms in that when the other kingdoms lost their horns, that was it? When Rome loses some of their horns, it continues to grow in another form. And I think because it gave birth to the papacy, I think that's part of why it's diverse from the other ones.
You talk about the beast. Right, the 4th beast was different from the others.
Yeah, diverse from the other
And that's
ones.
what made it different from the others. Yep.
Oh, you know what?
Because it was
Because-
religious as well.
Yeah.
Because you know how you said that they allowed them to keep their own religion, and they didn't wipe them out completely? The Ostrogoths and the Khazarites and the
Vandals.
yeah, the Vandals, they fought back. And because they would not be subdued, they had to wipe them out completely.
Right, you're no longer allowed to keep your own religion.
They wiped them out.
Right,
And there's not supposed to be any from that tribe left, but supposedly there are some people from the Vandals, I believe, from those tribes, because they wiped them out supposedly completely.
Well, that's why it says it plucked them up by the roots, because there was not many of them left of
Yeah.
those 3 tribes, of those 3 nations.
Okay, so Sue asked a question. There's 10 horns. 3 got plucked out. That means there were 7 left. That means that 8 is the horn that was doing the plucking, right? So there's 8.
Because I didn't count the little one. Gotcha. Okay.
So there's there's eyes in the horn, eyes in the man,
And a mouth.
and a mouth speaking pompous words. So who
And
is
another
this?
way to translate pompous words is blasphemies.
Yes.
Is that the papist?
That is-
Right, so this is where we start enlarging on mystery, right? Okay, so now we're getting more information about Rome. Okay, so this is where we're kind of diverging from the image and getting more information about this
The little horn?
papal Rome. Papal Rome.
Well, there's two Romes. There's pagan Rome and there's papal Rome. But they're both Rome. And that's the thing, that's what the other thing that made it different from the other beasts, is it continued, and it's just in another form.
Okay, so we have 1 Babylon, 2 bear, 3 leopard. Is that right?
Yes.
Four.
Pagan Rome.
4th beast, and then we have just the big horn, which is 5, right?
So you're saying pagan Rome merged into papal Rome?
Yep.
Pagan
Right.
pagan Rome became papal Rome.
Right.
Okay.
Is pagan Rome Constantine? No,
Mhm.
it is Constantine?
Well, that's where it changed.
Because he
Constantine.
decided he wanted to he switched to Christianity, right?
Right, Constantine is where it switched from pagan Rome to papal Rome.
Right.
Well, it
Battle
didn't-
of Malvern Hill.
Right, and it didn't actually become papal Rome at that point. It didn't become papal Rome until 538, when, starts with a T. Help me out, Jeffrey.
Justinian.
Justin, there's the T, Justinian. When Justinian, as the emperor, gave basically state power.
Well, the
To
bishop,
the
was
Pope.
Tertullus. Tertullus was the bishop of Rome at that
Okay.
time, and he was the one who gave it into their hands, right?
So he gave, Justinian basically handed over, and that's when the church and the state unified into one.
Okay.
So that canceled
That's
out
where it morphed.
And that's where it morphed, and that's where you
pagan.
really couldn't
that
keep your own
canceled
beliefs
pagan
anymore.
Rome. But that canceled out the
Okay.
pagan Rome, right?
Even though, as they were
Okay.
growing, they were taking pagan beliefs, they were snatching them up and putting them into the service to make it more palatable to the pagans.
Yes.
Even the Jewish.
They were creating
Right.
a religious system.
That's what Constantine was trying to do,
Right, it was
to
a-
remain in power.
Right, it was a religious system, but it had, that's when Sabbath moved to Sunday.
Mhm.
Was because Sunday was a day that the sun worshipers worshiped the sun.
Right.
Literally the sun in the sky,
Well,
the
plus Satan
glowing
has to have his
orb.
own day. He has to have his own day.
God's got his own day, why can't Satan have his own
Yeah.
day?
Which goes back to the
Well, that's what
image
he
that
wants.
was in Genesis, right? To the image that was here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that established the 7. Let us make man in our own image, right? So that image that he was talking about was Christ's kingdom, whereas the image that we're talking about here is Satan's,
An image to the beast.
an image of the beast.
So I was going to say the triangle.
Yes, Brian's going to do the triangle. We know when papal Rome's power ended, right?
1798.
So those are the dates. Go ahead, do the triangle.
So what makes up the government?
No,
What makes up a government?
So the little horn, if we're gonna draw a little horn, let's just draw a little horn.
Yeah, sure.
It becomes a great one.
You want a great
It
one?
does.
I think I can do this one.
A little horn with a couple of eyes and a big
And
mouth.
remember the Bible what a horn stood for,
So
right?
what makes up a government?
Oh, you gotta have a
King.
king.
Yeah, the king.
King. So we have king.
Jesus.
And we have
Subjects.
Servants?
subjects. Subjects. Or is it kingly and priestly
Right.
and deity?
Yeah.
So
Focus of
in
worship.
this government here, in this last kingdom, what makes up this government?
Unfortunately, the Pope is top. Well, God's supposed to be.
Rome said they were all.
Well, so what we're talking about here is Satan's government, being in power for 1,260 years, correct? And that's, we talked about, that's when the papacy was given power. Was it Justinian gave over his consent for the papacy to rule over them? So I'm asking you, what goes here?
Well, in that kingdom, it has to be Satan.
Okay, so Satan. And who's in kingly then?
That's where the Pope
Yeah.
is, in the kingdom.
So who is in the priestly position?
The priests,
Priest.
the Holy Roman Catholic Church.
Right?
But they
And so,
combine,
and what were they doing? They were being priests. They were representing, or they were teaching the people, or the congregation, which is actually down here. They were teaching them about
The new
their
way.
deity, the new,
Power.
right, I guess the whole new government.
Yeah.
Right, so this would be, the priests.
now that was a combination between the Jewish priests.
No,
They
Catholic
didn't
priests.
combine their beliefs,
no.
because the Jewish priests, they
So
do what the fake priests do.
that's what differs between these governments
Yeah.
and this government, this fifth government. That fifth government was different because it told you what to do as far as your worship goes. It was enforcing these rules of worship.
So wouldn't the Pope be in the priestly position and wouldn't be the king or the king who has the troops to enforce it? Wouldn't he be the king?
No, because all the kingly powers were given to the Pope.
Just think how the Pope dresses.
Well, and
Pomp and circumstance.
think about your medieval history. The king was only the king because the Pope said he was.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, back then too, yeah.
The Pope made, earlier in Daniel, we talked about Daniel was interpreting the vision, and he talks about God who raises up kings and sets down kings, and, raises up nations and takes things. Well, the Pope was the one that decided in medieval history and right up in towards the Renaissance even, who was a king. There were wars in a lot of countries because somebody didn't want to obey the Pope, and the Pope, soldiers were sent and people were killed. And that's Satan's deal. Worship my way or die. That's
why those three kingdoms were plucked up, because he sent the armies of the other nations to do away with those three kings because they were resisting that religious authority, or him as a religious authority, as a king.
And isn't it interesting now, in this past couple weeks or month, the apologies that are going to all those events that you're talking back years now, the papacy is going and asking forgiveness for the wrongs that they have done throughout history, where they took part in even the Jews being persecuted and before that. And this is just in the last week or 7 days, 10 days, that all coming back. And I just think of, what Mike says, how they're going to come back and they're just going to apologize, but it does not change the screen. It's the screen. It's so the screen.
So did you look to see, because it said there was a reason, there was something behind all the apologies? Did you look, because I didn't get a chance to watch it, did you look to see?
Well, we know what
it
the
was?
apologies are, and Debbie just said it, it's a screen.
Yeah, but I'm saying they said there's something specific behind the apologies. Did anybody
Yeah,
look
I
to
don't
see
remember
what-
that, I just remember just listening to, as he's going through all of them, all of these nations and people, and from as far back as you could reach, it was,
before there was a papacy.
yes, before, and it just apologizing for their hand in it, their hand
Because
in
they're
it,
building up their
They're
power.
building up
They're building up their power.
But I
Their
thought
credibility.
their
John
credibility.
didn't Pope John Paul, didn't he apologize?
Oh, no,
already?
this is other things that this Pope is coming out and apologizing
Oh,
for.
who would sit in this room and, you know, just accept what you're saying. I know what you're saying, but when I think about who Catholics worship, they don't worship Satan, they worship God/church. The problem is that they worship church, the Catholic Church. That's where the trouble comes in. They don't worship Satan.
We're not saying that they
no.
do.
No, they're not.
They're
They're
not.
putting Satan as the deity.
Sue, you're absolutely right. And there's a huge distinction to be made between
The
a
system.
Catholic sitting in a pew and
And the system.
Catholicism as a system.
I get that. I do get
And
that.
they're not worshiping Satan, but the system is set up to worship, to create a system where you say you're worshiping God, the one true God,
It's a
the way He
counterfeit
wants.
system.
Counterfeit.
And it's not actually being, it's the same thing that Cain did. When God sent him to the wilderness to learn, instead he went and built a city.
Right.
But he says, I'm worshiping God. It's the same thing you see over and over again throughout the scriptures is, we're worshiping God, but they're not. They're doing their own thing, saying they're worshiping God. And there are certain aspects of Roman Catholic
And they're being deceived.
system. There's deception in it.
Deception.
You know, going to a priest to have your sins forgiven is not scriptural.
Right.
And there's a lot of behind the
And there's
scenes
a-
stuff that the Catholics sitting in the pews don't know about.
Yes.
Right.
But you have the priesthood and the upper echelon, they know what's going on.
And even the priesthood, there are some
Sometimes I think
there are
priests
some-
don't.
good Christian priests even
Right.
within Catholicism.
Oh,
Right.
You know, but as you get further up, those are people that you will never see in, you know, they'll not be deciding if there's black smoke or white smoke coming out when they're picking a new pope.
Right.
Those guys will never get to those levels. They're just not going to be there. But so it's not Catholics
Yeah.
that we're talking
No,
about. This is the deception. This is the great deception.
You know, I think it's interesting you brought up Cain, because Cain built the city, which is not what God told him to do, but what did he name the city?
Enoch.
Enoch. What does Enoch mean? Dedicated to God.
Right.
You know, he was totally going his own way, disobeying God, yet pretending that, oh, look what I'm building, a city dedicated to God. You know?
Counterfeit.
That's
So-
why
yeah.
it's so,
Mhm.
yeah, like, if you make counterfeit money, you make it so perfect that
Well,
only experts can tell the difference.
Well, the lie,
If you could.
the lie has to look like the truth in order for it to
To be
believe.
lying.
And counterfeit money is a perfect example.
Mhm.
It has to look like real money to be functional as counterfeit money.
And that's
Yeah.
why
The lie has to look just like the truth.
I
That's
know
why
all
the
this, I
priests
just
on
have
the
really,
ground
I just
have
have
to
really have a hard time with that.
Doesn't Jesus-
I know everything you're saying, and I agree with it.
You
But
could,
Jesus
you
said
could
that
probably
he's a
put every
jealous God.
denomination there,
Yeah,
because every
exactly.
denomination's
Yeah, any
leadership is getting
denomination in
deceived right now.
Absolutely.
But Jesus said that
There's
he's
an
a
image
jealous
to the
God.
beast being formed right now,
Right,
and
because all
there's
will
many
worship.
duped to leadership all over denominations. In our own
Yes.
denomination,
Even on ours.
there's leaders that are being duped.
So it gets
Yeah.
to make
So
this
do you
more
remember a
clear.
long time ago, we talked about when the Bible goes into poetry form is when
Yeah.
the message gets really deep? So what do you notice about
It's in poetry
we're
form.
going into poetry form? Okay, so
Sorry.
that's okay. So today we've talked about the first 5 parts of this dream.
There's the difference between the two. It's kingdom versus kingdom.
Christ is our priest, and our high priest,
And our king.
and our king, and priest according to Melchizedek, which was never beginning or never ending. And then, yeah, and then the king.
Well, also us would be in the priesthood as well.
Yeah.
Christ and us,
Well, we come over that, yeah, people come.
because we are God's representatives here. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Just
That's
thought
good.
it might make it a little clearer.
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's our alarm. So next week, we're going to talk about the 2 other parts of the dream. Okay, starting with verse 9.
9.
And, you know, keep in mind that when we talked about the rock, we were saying that the rock judges this entire image and crushes it. Okay, so kind of keep in mind judgment as you read verse 9 and 10 and 11. And then, of course, you know,
There's two sets, right? There's 9 through 10, and then there's 13 and 14 that go into that
Did you
poetry
say-
language.
he basically repeats the message 3 times.
Okay.
Remember the threes? Everything
Yes.
in the Bible goes by threes. So he repeats this really important message 3 times. And so it's basically enlarging on these 2 parts of the kingdom. You know, the rock and the great mountain.
What part did you say was,
The rest of Daniel 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I had a question,
Sure.
just about the question that Sue had asked. When Jesus says that he's a jealous God, that we're not to worship anything or anyone but him, right? And if we're worshiping anyone other than him,
Or anything, you
Or
know,
anything
science,
other
career,
than him.
computers.
yeah, then, because the Bible also says that if we don't choose to align ourselves with God, that we have ultimately made the choice to align ourselves with the devil, because we have not made the choice, because God says he has to be chosen. He's not going to force anyone. He says that we have to choose him. And if we don't choose him, then we have chosen to
Right, and we
You've
don't think of it that
You've
way.
chosen Satan even though you haven't actually chosen
Right.
Satan.
Exactly, because
It's like, well, no, I don't choose
Right.
Satan. It's like, well, no, you do. When you don't choose God,
Right.
you by
There's
default
only one.
choose Satan. It's not a I'm choosing to, you know, it's just the way it is. I mean, it's not that you're choosing to worship Satan.
It's just like where he says, not all are Israelites that call themselves Israelites.
Right, and all the ones that will come to him later on at the end and say, but didn't we cast out demons in your name? Didn't we do? Saying, Lord, Lord, he said, depart from me, I never knew you.
Right.
because we don't choose to obey his law.
Right. Or, you know, I think of that song, All to Jesus I Surrender. And I tremble when I just
Yes.
sing that song, because really, you know.
I'd like to rewrite that to all to Jesus. I'm in the process of surrendering.
But you know what I found out this week?
Yeah.
What I found out this week about the surrendering, he said that when we surrender, it's just simply saying, I don't have control over anything that happens in my life. There's no way that I can have control. And so I'm giving you control over everything that I don't have control over, which is everything. Because
Accept your choices.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to think
Accept the
about it.
choices you
know,
make as the circumstances unfold. You have control over those.
Yeah, we live our lives like, I surrender some.
Yeah.
But thank God he brings us from faith to faith and glory to glory.
Yeah.
Because that's the
Yeah.
process.
I know I'm not where I need to be, but praise God, I'm not where I was.
All right. Would you like to have closing prayer, Cynthia?
Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much for this understanding that you're giving us of who you are and, Lord, of who you created us to be. We ask, Lord, that your Holy Spirit will be in each one of us. As we study, as we learn more about you, that we will be used in your service. We ask you, Lord, to bless each one of us here, our families, and those of our loved ones, Lord, that you will create in them a new heart. And we just thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.